Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new build in my series Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. Today I am bringing you another build in my series where an entire build that I do is inspired by a single Nancy Drew game. This might include the mystery of the game, the color scheme of the game, items that you might find, the characters. Basically anything in the game can inspire the build. And today we are doing the final scene. The final scene was the first Nancy Drew game that I ever completed, and so it holds a very special place in my heart. It has consistently remained one of my favorite Nancy Drew games. I just love the mystery, I love the characters, I love the mystery of the spooky, abandoned old theater setting, and so I really wanted to do it justice when I was doing a build inspired by the final scene. So for this build, this is in Del Sol Valley, which is kind of like the Hollywood version of The Sims 4 that came with Get Famous. And this world came with some really atrocious builds. Let's be honest, they were really, really bad. And on this particular lot is where Judith Ward's house used to be. Judith Ward is one of the Sims that came with Get Famous, one of the townies, and she's supposed to be kind of like old Hollywood celebrity. She used to be really famous. She was in every single movie, and now she's kind of going through a crisis in the later years of her career, feeling like she isn't getting the roles that she wants anymore and is no longer kind of like the hot young thing in the acting world. So I really wanted to go and build Judith a new home. The home that she got in the pack is just really not doing it for me. And I figured she deserved a final scene inspired home. So what we did with this home was really go for old Hollywood vibes. I definitely get kind of old Hollywood vibes from the Royal Palladium Theater in the final scene. I also wanted to do a lot of red and a lot of gold, and to help make it feel more grand as well, there's also a lot of white and black. But as far as like the actual colors that we use, red and gold are the main colors, and that's because those are the main colors that we see in the Royal Palladium Theater. So I did the entire exterior of this build off camera because it took a long time. It was like 2 hours of building off screen to make the exterior how I wanted it. And basically we have really lush gardens, but very manicured, very symmetrical. On one side there's a pool, on the other side there is a hot tub, and it is completely gated off for Judith's privacy. And then the interior brings kind of those similar ideas in on the inside as well. So we have a very grand build style overall. Grand is definitely the word, which I love about the Royal Palladium Theater too, because it is such a grand building, but it's a falling apart grand building. And so I like to imagine that this kind of style is what the Royal Palladium would have felt like in its prime before it started to be neglected. So this is kind of like bringing Royal Palladium vibes back to life in a way. Right here we are working on the dining room. It's a very traditional floor plan as well, in that each of the rooms are kind of closed off, and very put together design. So all of the colors are matching. It's a very purposeful design. You can definitely tell that it was designed with a particular look and aesthetic and color scheme in mind. It's not just things that were kind of purchased over time. This was all done at once by an interior designer. So in the dining room, we're going with this royal blue scheme. I did try out the red walls, but the trim on the red walls wasn't matching the doors that I wanted to use. It was more of kind of like a bronze and a kind of like a silvery, and that just wasn't working for the doors that I was using, and so I went with the blue instead. At this point, I'm just pulling out a bunch of items from the Vintage Glamour stuff pack because I knew I wanted to use a lot of items from that pack in the build, and just placing them in rooms where I knew I wanted to use them. So this build utilizes a lot of the Vintage Glamour stuff pack. It uses a lot of the Sims 4 Get Famous. It does use a couple of items from the Decor to the Max kit as well. But I think it's mostly Get Famous, Vintage Glamour, some base game stuff, some decor to the max. Basically anything that looks expensive and grand is what we used in this build. Oh, also some stuff from university and high school years to get some of that Art Deco feeling, because I feel like Art Deco is also really good at kind of conveying that old Hollywood style. And now we're moving on to the kitchen, which I think is always a tough room to do in The Sims when you're trying to do kind of a more old school style build. I feel like the kitchens are always really hard to realize in that kind of style, because a lot of the kitchen stuff that we have in The Sims 4 looks either more like classical or more suburban or more cottagey, but very rarely does it just kind of look grandiose. And so I did my best using a lot of colors, a lot of like the black and the white to make this look more grand. It's an interesting floor plan too, because I was working around the windows and trying to still make sure that there was a ton of counter space. I also put a popcorn machine, of course, because this build is based off of the final scene, and so we simply must have a popcorn machine. There's also lots of beverage options. There is a bar outside to kind of also get that, like, you can go to the concession stand and get a drink kind of feel as well. And then I just tried to clutter up the kitchen with a bunch of items that felt like they belonged in a really grandiose kitchen. The Sim who lives here, Judith Ward, I think absolutely must have a butler, and so Judith doesn't actually spend any time in this kitchen. The butler does. The butler does everything in this kitchen, the butler and the maid. So I just made it more of a functional space with the clutter items, things that the butler or the maid would be regularly taking out to use. And yeah, just trying to make it feel like a space that's being used regularly. I do also think that Judith Ward throws a lot of events and parties. I think she's really into publicity and looking like she is still really important. She's definitely giving me Brady Armstrong vibes, because he's also worried about his fame and his image very consciously. And so Judith, I thought, also would be struggling with some of the same stuff. So throwing lots of parties to show that she's still relevant, that she still matters. Definitely also Brady Armstrong vibes as well. Love to see it. And I think we're pretty much done with the kitchen here. I've also been using the floor from the Paranormal Stuff pack in basically all of the rooms that don't have the marble floor, because I wanted a really fancy wood flooring, and I just really liked the way that this yellow one looked with the doors that lead into each of the rooms. So I basically use that yellow parquet flooring in every single room. This little living room space uses the decor to the max kit. I thought the wallpaper with that really fancy floral design reminded me a lot of kind of the really fancy, I don't even know what it's called, but the really fancy applique wallpaper in the final scene, where the walls themselves just have texture and almost feel like they were like hand embroidered or something. Definitely wanted to go for that vibe. This is also one of the rooms where we get the most red accents, really getting in that final scene royal red kind of feel, using a lot of Art Deco light pieces and fancy furniture. Really going with the grand theme in here. I could easily see this being kind of like a private room for people who went to the theater, who went to the Royal Palladium Theater and were having like a little sit down before the show. I could definitely see this being more of a private room. It kind of feels like the Magician's Room to me as well. I also wanted to put a tea set in here because this is where Judith would host during the day. So small gatherings. She would have people come in here and they would have tea. They would discuss new scripts and new story ideas, anything like that. New shows that were happening, all the latest gossip. This house, I think, could work really well for any sort of rich and lavish sim. It doesn't necessarily need to be a performer sim, but I definitely did make it for an actress primarily, Judith Ward primarily, but it could be used for a lot of different sims, I think. Any sims with a taste for the finer things in life would, I think, be quite happy here. So this room is going to be a screening room, a movie room. I simply had to include a movie room in this build because the final scene takes place in a theater, and the Royal Palladium in recent years had been kind of transformed to be more of a movie theater than a play theater. So I use these big curtains from the Get Famous expansion pack that really reminded me of the curtains on the stage in the Royal Palladium. And then I set up a full seating. I was trying to find ways to make it look like movie theater seating. And what I eventually decided to do was to use these couches from the Dream Home Decorator game pack because I thought the texture of them really looked kind of like theater seats. And I loved the reddish color that they came in, especially with the darker lighting. They looked very burgundy, which is kind of like a richer form of red, and looked really nice in the room itself, using a really fancy coffee table. So this is the room where Judith would bring in any directors or any screenwriters that she's wanting to work with, and they're brainstorming ideas together. Any producers, they would come into this room. And this is also where she would like view some of like the first cuts of her movies, give them the stamp of approval, or give any notes that she has. So I wanted to make it a really relaxing space, very dim light. I put some incense in there because you want to get into the vibe before you watch your movie. You have to get really, really zen so you can give the best feedback. And then I also liked putting down the glasses and this little notebook and this notepad to be like, okay, this is what Judith is using to take notes on the movies that she's watching, so she can give feedback and then final suggestions. I was trying to use this blanket here to put a comfy blanket on the couch because I didn't like how blank it was. I really wish we had more pillow options in The Sims 4. It would be game-changing to be able to put pillows on couches and beds as decorative items. That would be so nice. But unfortunately, we don't have that. And the blanket I was trying to use didn't quite fit, so I decided to just leave the couches blank. We're now moving on to the bathrooms, which are going to be the most modern room in the house. All of the bathrooms. There's 3 bathrooms in this house. And I tried to kind of keep a mix of the traditional ornate and then kind of a more modern, sleek look as I was making the bathrooms. And then I finally just kind of gave in and was like, you know what? In order to make this feel as fancy of a bathroom as I want, I'm going to need to just go modern with it, because what I really wanted these bathrooms to feel like was like an oasis, a space for these really wealthy Sims to go and do their spa treatments, do their skincare, take a really fancy bath, take a really fancy shower. And I couldn't get that same vibe with the more ornate styling. It just felt too old. It felt too bold, really. Too old and too bold. It just wasn't working for the style that I wanted. It didn't feel relaxing enough. And I feel like any Sim that can afford to live in a house, 1, this big, and 2, this lavish, is going to they're going to be really high maintenance, and they're going to need like a really fancy bathroom where they can really just chill out. So that's what I decided to do. I went full modern in these bathrooms. I went with black and blue, which is not very final scene, but I think it worked more for the storytelling that I'm trying to go for with this particular build. So imagine like Brady Armstrong living in this house. He would want a fancy bathroom, and he would want one where he can go and do all of his skin and hair treatments so that he can feel very ready to kind of take on the press, take on the world, express his image to the world. I did include a jazz painting in the bathrooms, and I will include them on the upper level bathrooms as well. I think the jazz paintings I never use, and they've been in the game ever since base game, and I never use them, but they actually worked kind of nicely in this build because they are ornate. They're in very ornate frames, and the final scene is very jazzy. There's lots of jazz music in it, so wanted to include that. In the entryway especially, and on this upper hallway level, there are lots of movie posters. And this is definitely hearkening back to the movie posters in the grand lobby of the Royal Palladium Theater. There are movie posters lining the stairways all the way up to the top, and so I definitely wanted to include as many movie posters as I possibly could, with the idea that Judith is in all of the movies that the posters represent. So this is going to be the main suite of the house. So Judith Ward's room in this case, since the house is technically for Judith. And I wanted to make sure to use this leopard print rug and this leopard print chair because it reminds me of Simone Mueller and her leopard print jacket. Simone's a big leopard print fan, so I definitely wanted to give a little reference to her. This room is basically all black and gold. And in a weird way, it feels kind of like warm and cozy to me. And maybe that's just because of the size of it. It is kind of like small and comfortable. Maybe it's also just because the black kind of makes it feel a little bit more closed in. I'm not sure. But regardless, it is basically everything from the Vintage Glamour stuff pack. So it is a very vintage glamorous room. And then the main suite continues with a walk-in closet. I was able to get some more red accents in this room, so definitely imagine the dressing rooms in the Royal Palladium. This room is kind of supposed to remind us of that with the vanity table here, the magazines, the makeup. Tried to make it feel a lot like a dressing room space. Also some incense, because of course when your Sim's getting ready, they need to really get into the moment, get into the zone. Right here, we're going to build a full closet with the Dream Home Decorator game pack items. And then later on, I'm going to remember that the Get Famous pack came with its own walk-in closet items, and then I'm going to use those instead because they, one, just match up with the style better, and two, work better in this kind of like corner style. The Dream Home Decorator items also work here, but they clip at the top if you're trying to do stuff in the corners. I do wish that that was a little bit different. I wish that there had been items from the Dream Home Decorator pack that actually did work in the corners for these built-in closets. And I also want to know, while I was building this closet, I was thinking, I have never used the Dream Home Decorator closet items that have the rounded edges. I don't think I've used them once. And that's because I don't want to build a connected closet that has little holes in it because of the rounded edges. But maybe that's just me. I'm just curious, does anyone actually use the rounded edge items from the Dream Home Decorator pack? Because I do not. That's not a thing I use at all. I always use the straight edge ones. But now we are moving on to the main suite bathroom, which has some of this black Vintage Glamour wallpaper and then the black Spa Day tiles, again going for a very modern bathroom, very spa-like. That's definitely what I was trying to go for. With a custom walk-in shower, just like on the lower level and also on the upper level eventually. I just copy the bathroom from the lower level and use that on the upper level. But this one is a little bit bigger, so and it's because it's the main suite one, I wanted to make it more grand as well. So I had kind of a fun time using this plant item from the plant kit to act as a divider in between the shower and bath spaces. I just thought it worked kind of nicely and gave the room more of a relaxing feel with the greenery, broke it up a little bit. When I think of really fancy bathrooms, especially on Pinterest, they always have some sort of like really crazy plant feature built into them. So I wanted to try and do something like that in this build. The bathrooms are probably the newest areas of this house, probably the areas that have been renovated or changed the most recently, because I feel like they're definitely the most trendy, and maybe Judith is starting to think that she's not trendy enough and she's starting to kind of like lose her spark, and so she's trying to switch parts of her life over to something that's a little bit more on trend, a little bit more younger, a little bit more modern. And so maybe she started with the bathroom, so all of the bathrooms have just recently been redone, and maybe she would change other parts of the house too, which would be tricky because the entire exterior of the house is very old Hollywood. I just looked up a picture on Pinterest and was just like, old Hollywood mansions, and this is more or less an exact replica of one of those pictures that I found. In the symmetry, the basically plain white walls, the tiny little balconies surrounding the very grand windows, the really manicured landscaping, all of it I definitely got from that inspiration photo. And I do really like how it turned out. I feel like maybe in this build, I didn't always include as many things that were very explicit to the final scene, and I was definitely more going for the overall vibe of the game that it gives me, and trying to convey that in the build. There have been some of these inspiration builds where I maybe focus more explicitly on the items that are in the game or the characters in the game, which I still definitely did with this game, with this build, but it was more the atmosphere and the environments that I was going for more completely than it was the actual things that you would see in the game, because it's a theater, it's not a house, and so there are fewer things I think that kind of fully carry over. So now we are working on the butler's room. So technically this is I would say it's actually like a 1, 2, 3, it could be a 4-bedroom home. Only 2 of the rooms are used as bedrooms. There's the main suite bedroom, and then there's this butler's room here. One of the rooms is being used as a home theater, and one of the rooms is being used as an office, but they definitely could also be used as bedroom spaces. This is where I realized, like, oh yeah, this item totally came with Get Famous, so I should put it here. Which just goes to show how often I use the Get Famous expansion pack, which is very little do I use the Get Famous expansion pack. I also haven't gotten to Get Famous in my Legacy Challenge, where every generation is a different pack yet. And I don't use Get Famous. I never go to Del Sol Valley either. As part of that Legacy Challenge, it just doesn't show up often. So it's probably, if I had to pick, my least used expansion pack. I think Get Famous is, I think I would confidently say that it's my least favorite and least used and probably the worst expansion pack for The Sims 4. So if you're looking at expansion packs, that is not the one I would recommend. Especially because these items are just so specific to a certain style and so difficult to use. Like, you can really only use these items if you have a really fancy old Hollywood sim. Otherwise, it's not really happening much. But now we're working on the office space, which I kind of think is just the more business room for Judith Ward. So this is where she's going to sign contracts. This is where she's going to, like, read her news in the morning. She's going to come up on the computer and, like, scroll through all of the news outlets and see if anyone's saying anything about her, or, God forbid, if anyone is saying anything about somebody else. She's very publicity conscious, just like Simone Mueller. She probably has an agent that is just like Simone, who really is good at playing the publicity game and is very focused on that. I definitely imagine she has an agent like that, and Judith herself is very into it, because she's kind of full of herself. She's a little bit into herself, just like Brady Armstrong, and so I think it would be a perfect match. But otherwise, this office space is the last space that we're designing in this house, which means that we can hop in and I can now give you a live tour. All right, here we are at Judith Ward's new mansion. It is kind of late evening, and I just love how fancy it looks in the lighting. So if we enter through these gates here, if we get exclusive permission to enter through these gates here, then we get to come into the main courtyard of Judith's house. And I just love how this looks from the front. Like, look how grand it is with all of the gold. Over here, we have just kind of these nice manicured gardens, the exact same ones on this side, very symmetrical. Judith definitely has a private gardener that comes to the estate to do the gardening for her. I'm also really pleased with how the landscaping turned out for this build. It just feels very, very Final Scene to me, and how grand it is. And all of the red flowers, I used a lot of red flowers to really get our red theme going for sure. So if we go through these gates over here, this side of the house has the pool with kind of like a waterfall feature, Judith getting her laps in. We have some relaxing beach chairs out here. This is where the bar is, some music. And then if we go around to the back of the build, this is where we can then see the symmetry of the house. So this is exactly the same on the back, just a little bit smaller. Again, love how it's looking in this kind of golden hour light. And then if Judith looks out over her view here, she can see the entire city, which is just so opulent, and I love it. If we continue around to the other side, this is kind of made exactly like the pool side, except it is the hot tub side. So this is kind of more the chill, relaxing side. We've got some fountains, some more water features, a little path leading out to the hot tub, the grill station, and the kind of like little tables for eating over here. So you can imagine that the pool parties that Judith hosts here are pretty wild, and very, very exclusive. Getting to come to these parties is how you know that you're an it sim for sure. I hope that paparazzi isn't just like breaking into Judith's house. So if we go up the stairway here into this super, super golden, opulent, elegant entryway, we then come in to see the grand staircases, which remind me a lot of the final scene with the double staircases. We have the beautiful light fixture on the top as well. We have the movie posters surrounding us and following the stairs, just like the Royal Palladium does. And just the marble and the gold feels so old Hollywood and so fancy to me. If we go to the left here, this is where we have our dining room space for entertaining with fancy dinners. All of the trophies remind me of kind of like Grammys or Oscars, just kind of like fancy statues and trophies and awards. Very fancy sitting area. The portraits remind me of the portraits of all of the magicians that are throughout the Royal Palladium, which is why there's going to be several portraits throughout the house as well. But I love the dining room space. Would definitely eat a very, very luscious 5-course meal there. And then if we go into the kitchen, we have kind of the cook space over here, popcorn machine, because of course we must have popcorn for Final Scene inspired build, a little dishwashing station over here, a double fridge set up, and then just kind of like necessities for tools of the trade, with pops of red and gold as often as possible. And then if we go back out into the main entryway and cross over to the other side of the first level, on this first door, we have the screening room. So this is our movie room, very red, just like the final scene. You can take notes on the movies that you're watching here and send them to the director, send them to the producer, let them know what you think. It's just kind of a warm and cozy space. Through this door is the only bathroom on the first floor. We've got the jazz painting to hearken to the jazz era of the final scene. A very fancy walk-in shower. Would definitely love the shower. It looks so nice. And then we have our very opulent living room here with lots of items from the Decor to the Max kit, a little tea set for entertaining and having all sorts of fancy little talks in here. This is the relaxing room. This is the definitely the sitting room of the house. So then if we go up one of the stairways here, we can go to the second level. The balcony is very small and doesn't have anything on it. It's honestly just kind of for show, but look at that view. Oh, okay, Judith, you are active now. Sounds good. Good for you. I'm very pleased for you. We have a tour to continue though, so thank you. But yeah, look at that view. Oh my gosh, I love it. With the lights in the background, just like the final scene. So if we go over to this side, we can see the office space here. This is where Judith is going to come and kind of like sign her contracts, read her scripts, read her gossip, be like Simone Mueller. We're going to keep our eye on all of the gossip that's going on in Hollywood. And then this is the butler's room. So definitely got to have a butler if you are a very famous superstar. And then this is the butler space. Honestly, pretty nice. And then the attached bathroom to both the office and the butler's room, exactly the same as the one downstairs. And then if we go all the way across the hallway, we have some more movie posters over here. And then we can enter the main suite through these doors. We have some beautiful leopard print in honor of Simone Mueller, and just this beautiful black gold main bedroom. As opulent as possible, as luxurious as possible. And then we walk through this door to have a full walk-in closet with full mirrors, a whole setup of beautiful fancy clothes, and then the dressing room setup, just like the dressing rooms in the final scene. So we have a little vanity here with our incense, our magazines for inspiration, more mirrors, all that good stuff. And then the main bathroom. So we have a really cool walk-in shower here divided with these plants from the plant kit. So imagine you can take a shower here and look at these plants over here, or you can go around and take a bath in the same area and, you know, get a nice little view out into the street there, into your beautiful luscious gardens. I would absolutely love this bathroom. And then a nice little getting ready setup in the corner here. And that is basically Judith Ward's mansion. It is now nighttime, and I think it looks just as magnificent in the night as it does during the day. I am really pleased with how this house turned out. It was a labor of love because, again, I really wanted to do the final scene justice, but you all have to let me know what you think. Does this house remind you of the final scene? If I didn't tell you I was doing a home inspired by the final scene, would you know that this is what I was going for? What kinds of things reminded you of the final scene? I would just love to hear all of that in the comments. But thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I do hope that you enjoyed this build. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.